The Boy in the Garage, Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. There was someone screaming. Wait, not someone, but something. It was Emmett's cell phone, which the couch he was seated on had gobbled up sometime in the night. It was ringing and vibrating, but somehow this did not help him locate the damn thing. God damn it, he grunted as he began digging in the couch cushions for his cell, throwing aside pillows and blankets as he went. Finally, he located the ridiculous piece of plastic inside the t-shirt he'd shed the night before. Seeing that he'd actually caught the call before it went to voicemail, he scrambled to answer. What? He grouched as he shoved a hand through his short, greasy hair. Hello, Mr. Cedars. This is Tim at Therapy RS. I'm calling you about the physical therapy session you missed on Thursday. We can reschedule if you... Do you have any idea what time it is? Emmett growled. It's 12:04 p.m., sir. Tim at Therapy RS went on awkwardly. If there's a better time of day for us to call in the future, just let me know, and I'll make a note of it. How would mid-afternoons work for... Emmett hung up. He knew it was smarter to just cancel the sessions rather than not show up for them, but that required receiving a lecture on taking care of himself. He'd gotten enough of those from his wife back when they'd still been living together. Better to keep dodging the calls in the hopes that P.T. Tim would just give up as a lost cause. It was what Jocelyn had done. Collapsing back onto the couch again, he took a deep breath as every part of his body that hated him, which was most of it, shouted a bright and cheery good morning. The surgical scar on his knee throbbed, his right hand cramped, the small lump embedded just under his heart, which had the power to shock him back to life if the organ got lazy, ached. As he silently told all of his hurts to go fuck themselves, he scanned for the TV remote, but found that the cushions had eaten that too. You eat more than I do, he grumbled at the leather couch that had been patched with duct tape so many places he liked to think it looked on purpose. It didn't. Luckily, it didn't take him nearly as long to locate the remote, which sat in an old pizza box. You're disgusting, he said as he peeled a piece of mozzarella cheese off of the remote, directing the sentence at the object in his hand as much as at himself. That done, he stabbed the remote in the direction of the TV and was greeted by the face of Andrea Mitchell from SMBC. He dialed up the volume and leveraged himself to his feet. His right leg protested, but after a slap and a threat, it held. With MSNBC blaring, he began hunting through the clothing scattered around his living room for the cleanest pair of blue jeans he had, which happened to be in the dirty laundry basket by the door. The irony was not lost on him. In today's news, a healthcare worker in Manhattan, New York, has been diagnosed with the novel coronavirus, announced the TV. The 39-year-old healthcare worker is the 89th person to be diagnosed in the United States, but is the first New Yorker. Damn it. Emmett fumbled buttoning up his shirt, a difficult task for him even on the best of days, a kind of day he was pretty sure he'd forgotten the definition of. Ever since the World Health Organization had declared the novel coronavirus a global health emergency at the end of January, Emmett's bosses at the CDC had warned him of how bad things could get. Given the current White House administration, Emmett had actually been surprised it had taken this long for the virus to hit New York. The only question he had now, why weren't his bosses taking away his vacation days, benefits package, and everything else he didn't actually receive in the effort to make sure he got ahead of this disaster? One glance at his phone gave him the answer. Apparently, Tim at Therapy RS hadn't been the first call he'd received that morning. He had 5 missed calls and 3 voicemails. The first voicemail was from an unknown name, unknown number, and was nothing but weird, heavy breathing. The second voicemail was from Jocelyn. Hey, Emmett, the voicemail started. Guess what? The whole station has heard that NYC has had their first coronavirus diagnosis. Everybody keeps asking me what I know. Jocelyn gave a small, sarcastic laugh. Huh! It's like they think we're still married and I know every thought that comes into your head. Her sigh was half resentful and half fond. Call me when you get this. Also, stop dodging your physical therapy appointments. PT Tim keeps calling me, trying to get you. And I think we're both too old for phone tag. Emmett winced. Ever since the divorce, he'd done his best to unburden Jocelyn from the responsibility of keeping him alive, if not entirely healthy. That wasn't a job anybody deserved. Emmett pinned his cell between his shoulder and his chin as he searched for his shoes. The apartment might have been considered large by NYC standards, but it felt tiny, consisting of only 3 rooms, yet he constantly lost track of things. As he started the third voicemail, which was from the CDC, he finally found his shoes half hidden under the boxers he kicked off last night. He really needed to stop changing clothes in the living room. Emmett, this is Brittany at the CDC. You got new orders going forward, so don't head into work until you call me back. These were the mornings that gave Emmett headaches, feeling one knocking at the base of his skull as if it had ever needed permission before. He grabbed a bottle of Advil from a cupboard that held nothing but cans of corn and a dead spider. He didn't even like corn, but he named the spider Charlotte a few months ago. Using coffee the temperature of the sun, he tossed back the painkillers along with the rest of his medications. Look at him. He'd remembered to take them for once. Yep, frickin' he. Emmett barely ducked into his bathroom. He did his best to finger comb his hair and straighten his clothes, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. He needed a shower, a shave, and to throw his clothes in the laundry. Scratch that. He should call Amazon and tell them he wanted to return his 41-year-old Caucasian body for a 2-day Prime shipped replacement. Maybe he'd go with something taller next time, something with a straighter smile or a hairline that didn't zigzag more than it had the right to. Really, his appearance was always greasy, worn out, and, as Jocelyn liked to put it, too often fell on the wrong side of homeless. Emmett left the apartment, but didn't dial the CDC until he'd reached the parking lot. He lived on the 7th floor of the Holiday Apartments, and had enough trouble climbing the stairs on a daily basis without also trying to hold a phone conversation with his boss. There was no elevator, and he had, as always, left his doctor-appointed cane in the apartment. Once he reached the parking lot and slid into what Jocelyn had always called his hunk of junk car, Emmett dialed Brittany at the CDC and had to push 8 different extensions to get through. He kept himself busy by imagining the Advil dissolving in his stomach, willing the process to go just a bit faster. It never worked in the past, but the queasiness it caused him at least served as a distraction. "Brittany Mears," Brittany answered. Emmett had learned long ago to make absolutely no comment on the woman's name, being similar to a certain celebrities. He might live his life permanently set to grumpy, but he knew better than to bite at the hand that mailed his checks. "Brittany," Emmett said, preferring to do away with actual greetings like hello or good morning, and going straight for grunts that only sounded like people's names by pure coincidence. "Whoever redid the automated menu, would you mind shooting them in the head? Or at least gouging out an eyeball? I've been trying to get through for 15 minutes. "Count yourself lucky it wasn't 8 times that. Ever since the news broke this morning about the first COVID case in New York, the phones won't stop ringing. You should appreciate that we have caller ID so I could choose you out of the 20 different lines I have going here." A deep sigh came over the phone. "Seems your predictions were right, though." Jocelyn always said I couldn't stand being wrong, but this time I'd have given my good leg to not be right. Emmett rubbed a hand over his face. It was true. Emmett's in-home therapy practice had come to a very abrupt, very violent end 2 years ago. Buried in hospital bills and in need of a total knee replacement, he'd had no choice but to accept the job the CDC offered him. The insurance package covered the new knee, physical therapy, medications, and later, an apartment no New Yorker could have afforded without 2 roommates, suffocating debt, and briefly considering selling themselves on the subway. However, it also resulted in a job where he'd never be defenseless against a vampire again. Working out of an office at the Mount Sinai Hospital, he interviewed vampires who volunteered to help the CDC combat the world's least fun diseases, like cancer and Alzheimer's. Late February had seen the United States' first death from the coronavirus. Hearing it on MSNBC, Emmett had felt the hairs on the back of his neck go up. Just a few days later, and the virus was in New York. "Your voicemail mentioned new orders?" Emmett asked. "Starting immediately, you won't be working out of Mount Sinai anymore. Everybody here in Atlanta is hoping this is an overreaction, but preliminary models are suggesting New York-based hospitals are about to become New York's new ground zero." As they did for any New Yorker, the words ground zero brought up too many flashbacks to 9/11. Brittany was still talking. "So you're being transferred to the 95th Police Precinct." "The CDC isn't worried about the conflict of interest?" Emmett frowned. "I'm pretty sure the CDC has more to worry about than you working out of the same building as your ex-wife, Emmett." Emmett flinched. Even though they'd been divorced for almost a year, the words still stung. Brittany told him she'd be sending the rest of the details to his secure email, including his new job description. By the time she was done telling him about all of the changes coming his way and the world's, his headache had stopped knocking at his noggin to become a battering ram instead. "I don't have to tell you how confidential all of this is," Brittany added. "As far as the public is concerned, your job hasn't changed. Your work with vampires has absolutely no relation to the CDC's goals for coming up with a coronavirus vaccine. You're still just screening vampires and sending them off to us here. If anybody presses you for answers, you just tell them you don't know anything more than they do. You screen and ship. You might as well be a one-man UPS. That's the extent of your involvement." "So I'm not telling the public that the world's best bet for a vaccine is actually vampire blood?" Emmett swallowed a scoff. "Way to make me feel like a teeny tiny cog in a much bigger, much more important machine." "Don't get cute. You aren't the only person the CDC has doing these screenings. We have 5 more of you across the country." "So you're not planning to have me double-check the vampires the other screeners select?" "Don't be a smart-ass, Emmett. Just do your job." Brittany hung up. Emmett stared down at his cell phone and wondered if the brick in his stomach was there due to being hung up on, or the suddenly looming apocalypse. If it was the former, he needed to call PT Tim back at Therapy R Us and give him an apology. Deciding he'd almost prefer an apocalypse over having to apologize to anyone, Emmett backed out of the parking lot and headed for the 95th Police Precinct.